Can we talk business, which is always good to have you on for this element of it, given you're knee deep in all sorts of exciting opportunities. Red Bull. We understand Red Bull are in talks and that they are at an advanced stage to be taking over Newcastle Falcons, to be concluded within the week, we understand. The Falcons were put up for sale by the owner Seymour Cody, who actually we've had on the show before and has spoken about some of the struggles of owning a Premiership club. They've been in talks with Prem Rugby and CVC Capital Partners about a multi-million-pound bailout, which will enable them to continue playing next year. That's Newcastle Falcons. Some potentially very interesting players that might well end up therefore coming through. Thinking of Red Bull ambassadors, Jack Noel. Yeah. I'm sure he might be swapping Ilda Ray for Toon. He might. Sia Khaleesi, another Red Bull athlete, I think. Mac Hansen also on board of the roster there. Discuss big brands with big ambitions coming in to potentially get involved in Prem Rugby.
Well, in my mind, it's a bit like La Rochelle, Vannes, Oyonnax, Lyon in the good old days. It's also a matter of covering the entire nation for the Premiership to have a club like Newcastle, represents the north, and if you have 6 London clubs and between Bath and Bristol, it's all the southwest. It doesn't really represent England. So it's absolutely essential that you have some clubs up there. When I was in the Premiership, there was Leeds in 2007, 2008, and it's really, really important to have that spread. If it's going to be the Premiership that represents the entire country, it's really important. So, given how far they are, given how struggling they are with finances, they've been holding on tight, and I think we were all sort of happy for them when they finally got some wins under their belts, and everybody heard about it. So if a new ownership arrives, it's already good news because it's essential for the Prem. And if it's Red Bull, who have the ability to do good things in sports for the last couple of seasons, who've got a lot of appetite to do it, so there's connections that could be made. They took a major ownership into the second football club of Paris, the Paris FC, who's gone promoted to the first division with in affiliation with the Arnaud family, LVMH. Yeah. So they've done really good things. They've showed it. They know obviously their jazz in terms of marketing and sponsorship. They can create something exciting and different out of it. So if it's going to be them, if it's going to be anybody, it would be great. If it's going to be them, it's the icing on the cake.
Penny, for your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think I just sort of can't get out of my head trying to get Knowlesy from Cornwall to Scarborough or somewhere up there. I think it'd be great for the game if we can do it. Red Bull's frustration in the past and why they've pulled out of rugby is their lack of ability to activate their assets. Because
there were a few partner reviews, weren't they?
Yeah, and they just didn't feel that they ever were allowed to do what Red Bull do, which is create amazing content in a way that is consumed by the masses. And I think that was their frustration. I think if you look at it from a business point of view, I think Red Bull are possibly outsold by Monster up north rather than, so maybe it's a play on that. We know that they're in at Leeds United, which could make an interesting play if they can connect the dots of there. I do agree there is a huge amount of rugby played up in Yorkshire and in the north as general that is untouched really, in terms of really grabbing it by the scruff of the neck. So I think there is stuff that you can do, and I hope it. In some ways, I hope it happens because it'd be a good win for the Premiership. But
do you think Red Bull buying into Newcastle Falcons is Red Bull buying into Newcastle Falcons, or do you think they will take the Falcons as a brand and potentially put it into Ellen Road, or Darlington's got a great stadium? Can you see them agitating a little bit?
Well, I think you've got to change something.
Right. So what would you change? What would you do if you're a Red Bull and you come in and you say, right, we've done the deal, now we're going to...
Yeah, you've got to do whatever's you feel is going to be the best to make a statement and get it done. Well, what you don't want to be is now Red Bull Falcons or whatever you're going to call it, and then just be the same as it is now, doing the same things. And that's not Red Bull anyway. They will do things differently. It depends on how the CVC partnership works with them and what they're planning on doing. And obviously there's all those loans that need paying off and everything else. So how do they do that? And is it going to be a blueprint for other major brands to come in to try and save the Premiership? There's 140 million that you've got to get off the balance sheet before you can actually invest in the teams. If you're looking at all 10 teams, average of 12 million a team or something.
Right.
So you've got to get rid of that 12 million before you can actually do anything around budgets, around where you spend it, and that's the big question mark. Is how they deal with that.
It is an age-old challenge, which is igniting rugby union in the north, and there have been, obviously Yorkshire, Carnegie, Leeds have had a crack at it. Newcastle have been sort of ever present, but it's flourished and dropped back down again a little bit. Do you see this as a genuine game changer, and do you see Red Bull being able to succeed where others have had a crack but not managed to?
If they're allowed to. Like you said, as you mentioned, they're in talks with CVC, and I'm sure all the Prem Rugby have been following this very closely. I don't think you should break the mold for anybody, but genuinely, I think if you don't break the mold, you're never going to go anywhere. So I hope that they're allowed to go over and beyond. I mean, it's so disappointing to hear Tin saying that they were sponsored of the RFU and then they got frustrated because they couldn't activate the brand. Yeah. I saw some of the content with Jake Noel training on a beach in Cornwall. And it's sensational stuff. Yeah. That's what, will appeal to anybody. Look at this cool athlete, who's doing drills, etc. I mean, and it's quality content. We are desperately in need of more quality content. So I hope that they're going to be allowed to shake things up, to do things totally differently, to have a different fan experience day, and just to make it really cool to go up north and to go watch a rugby game. And hopefully it could be the blueprint for any other club down south and potentially even France. I mean, you're always praising, the French system. We don't have major sponsors coming in and shaping it in different ways. Moed Altrad is a cladding company. It's not the same sponsor. Yes, they have huge checkbooks, which is great, don't get me wrong. But there's never been an idea of how do we take a brand to a different level? How do we, boost sponsorship and marketing? And even players individually, they can allow them, to power their brand more. So it's a must to have a big financial sponsor in any
the thing is,
in any league. But if it's them, it's the sponsorship of capital, but also the knowledge of marketing. I hope they're allowed to do what they want to do.
But you look at the immediate hardship. Like, how are they going to suddenly shift the squad for next year if they do come in? Because most people are signed up now. So where are you getting your marquee players from? Where are you going to get the instant impact through player recruitment? The difficulty is like you talked about. If you go down, Leeds have got Red Bull involvement in football, but they're about to go in. If they were still in the Championship, it might be, but they're promoted to the Premier League. So then there's going to be enough going on there. And at the moment where it operates, there's two massive football teams. So, you said like Darlington, in terms of somewhere where there necessarily isn't an immediate world-class football team. Can you activate that way? But it's going to be what happens to those clubs around. I mean, I've done an event up there with the Rugby Wine Club, and the amount of local teams there are around Newcastle and how much they sort of join in, but it doesn't really show as footsteps through on a weekend. So, can Red Bull do creative stuff at the stadium to get more people and make it less about the 80 minutes and more about what's going on, and building something outside the stadium that allows local clubs to come and invest in it. And if you can think outside the usual rugby box, then which Red Bull can do.
But then I hope that in a year's time, if Red Bull have done a really good job and stuff, I hope we don't start talking about the salary cap again. Right. That it's going to be like a limitation for them to attract, new players and for them to come, etc. I hope they're going to allow them to have, not full reins, but to genuinely being able to use that financial striking power to create something different. And that's when the whole thing of salary cap being there to try to prevent teams from going bust, which unfortunately is not working at the moment, is not going to be a limitation to their ambition.
I just quickly want to go through some of the homegrown players that Newcastle have let go in recent years. Phil Brantingham, Jamie Blamar, George McGuigan, Trevor Davison, Guy Pepper at Bath, Callum Chick, who's off to Saints, Max Pepper at Bristol, Louis Johnson, Josh Hodge, who's at Exeter, Tom Penny, Gloucester, Chris Harris, Gloucester, Adam Radwan, who's ripping up trees with Leicester now, Ewan Stevens at Cardiff, and Ben Redshaw, who's off to Gloucester. Not necessarily all household names, not all international players. We've got Chris Harris, who's a Lion, though. But if you manage to retain even 2/3 of that, Newcastle are a very different club, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. And, if you can do that, or even if you just pull back the ones that have gone further afield, then it has to be embedded in roots there. I think what they need to do is invest in the local schools. You've got so many sort of private schools up that area and local schools and local clubs that you need to invest in. If you can do that, the whole idea would you've got to pull the community with you.
Yeah.
And ask them to support you on your journey. And then
why did you never play up there?
I went and did a training weekend up at Newcastle with Johnny and Rob Andrew. And
what age were you?
So that was 97. Before I basically did Newcastle, Gloucester, and Bath.
35.
And then
it was 35 in 1997.
Certainly looked it.
And I had a choice, but Newcastle and Gloucester wanted me to go to uni, and Bath just offered me a 1 year, just go and see how you get on, and that worked better for me at the time. I wanted to defer my uni for a year anyway.
Right.
So that's why I ended up in Bath.
Interesting. Sliding doors. Really interesting to see how this unfolds. I know Steve Diamond's been instrumental in it. I think everybody would hope that at some point the switch is flicked, and hopefully this might well be it.
On the sliding doors, mate, it would have generally been a sliding doors, because if Bath had offered me the same thing of going to uni, I was going to Durham Uni anyway. So
you would have ended up at
gone to
Newcastle.
Durham, and I ended up at Newcastle.
What were you going to do at Durham?
Sports psychology.
Oh, were you? God, the Tins and Johnny dream team would have had even more chapters to it. Who knew?